Welcome to my channel. It started like any other broadcast. A polished studio, cameras rolling, lights gleaming. The news anchor, poised and confident, sat behind the desk. She was known for her wit, her sharp tongue, and her unapologetic approach to interviews. And that night, she had a high-profile guest, former President Donald J. Trump. The conversation began calmly. The anchor asked questions about current political affairs, the economy, and international relations. Trump, known for his confrontational style, answered in his usual fashion, blunt, defiant, and occasionally controversial. The tone remained professional until the topic shifted toward Trump's past statements on media credibility and his infamous battles with journalists. That's when things took a turn. The anchor, smirking slightly, posed a sarcastic question. So, Mr. Trump, do you still believe you're the only one telling the truth in a room full of facts? The question, while cleverly worded, carried a tone of mockery. The studio audience, though muted, could sense the tension. Trump paused, looked directly at the anchor, and instead of responding with his usual jabs or defenses, he leaned forward and said something that caught her completely off guard. "You think this is a game, don't you?" he said calmly. "Faux." The anchor, taken aback by his change in tone, tried to interrupt, but Trump continued. "You sit there and laugh, but let me tell you something you didn't expect to hear from me tonight. I've sat with grieving families who've lost loved ones to policy decisions, to crime, to war. I've held the hands of mothers who don't care if I'm Republican or Democrat. They just want someone who listens." The room fell silent. "I've made mistakes," Trump admitted. "I've said things I shouldn't have. But the media never cared about the truth. They cared about the show. And you, right now, are more focused on getting a viral moment than actually listening to what people out there are going through." The anchor stared at him. No smirk now, just silence. Trump went on. "You see, you can laugh at me. Millions already have. But I've walked into factories where men hadn't had a paycheck in 6 months and they didn't laugh. They just asked, 'Can you help us?' And I tried." He paused. The camera zoomed in slightly, catching the gravity of his face. "Oh, you don't have to like me. You don't even have to agree with me. But you should never mock the people who believe in something, even if it's something you don't understand." For once, the anchor didn't know how to respond. She glanced at her notes, tried to recover the rhythm of the interview, but the moment had already shifted. The studio wasn't watching a politician defend himself. They were watching a man peel back the layers of political theater and speak with raw, unfiltered sincerity. Trump leaned back, his expression firm but composed. "You want to laugh? Go ahead. But don't be surprised when people stop watching the news and start looking elsewhere for answers." The interview wrapped up soon after, but the aftermath was intense. Clips of the moment flooded social media. Some accused Trump of playing the victim. Others, including some of the anchor's own viewers, admitted that for the first time, they actually stopped and listened. And the anchor? She later addressed the incident during a separate broadcast, acknowledging that while she still disagreed with much of Trump's politics, she didn't expect the conversation to become as serious or as personal as it did. It became a reminder that behind the headlines, behind the sound bites and viral moments, are real people, real beliefs, and real consequences. And sometimes, all it takes is one unexpected answer to silence a room and change the conversation. She sat at her desk after the show, staring at the playback of the interview, her face frozen in a moment she hadn't prepared for. That was supposed to be another political face-off, another clip for social media, another snappy exchange. But instead, she found herself thinking about his words long after the cameras were off. Behind the scenes, the newsroom buzzed. Producers discussed ratings. Editors trimmed the segment for highlights. But the anchor wasn't focused on any of that. She kept hearing his voice in her head. "You should never mock the people who believe in something, even if it's something you don't understand." That line hit differently. She had built her reputation on being sharp, fearless, and skeptical, especially of politicians. But something about the way Trump had spoken, not defensive, not combative, just real, had knocked down her guard. The next day, the headlines didn't focus on a fiery clash. Instead, they read, A Trump surprises anchor with emotional appeal on live TV as a rare moment of sincerity shakes up national broadcast anchor. Caught off guard by Trump's unexpected honesty, people across the country, on both sides of the political aisle, began sharing the clip. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was different. There was no yelling, no shouting over each other, just one man saying something that, for once, didn't sound rehearsed. Viewers commented, "I'm not a Trump fan, but this was powerful." A first time I've ever seen her speechless. Politics aside, this was a human moment. Back at her network, the anchor decided to address it. The next evening, she opened her broadcast with a statement. One she had written herself without approval from the producers. She looked directly into the camera. "Last night, many of you watched an interview where I laughed, and I admit I expected to catch my guest off guard. Instead, I was the one surprised, not by his political stance, but by the reminder that every person sitting in that chair, regardless of party or platform, carries stories we don't see. That was my lesson." She paused before adding, "As journalists, our job is to question, to probe, to challenge. But we also must listen, truly listen, especially when we least expect to." That small admission earned her respect from people who had never watched her before. Not because she changed her views, but because she had the courage to admit when she had misjudged a moment. And Trump? He never commented on it again. He didn't tweet about it. He didn't mention it in rallies. He just moved on, perhaps knowing that sometimes the most powerful moments don't need to be shouted, only heard, but the impact remained. That's because in a world where noise dominates the conversation, that one moment of unexpected honesty between a man used to being hated and a woman used to being right reminded millions of viewers that we're not just watching politics. We're watching people. And every now and then, people surprise you. In the weeks that followed, something unusual began to unfold. The clip of that moment continued circulating, not as a meme, not as a joke, but as a conversation starter. Talk shows dissected it. Podcasters broke it down line by line. Analysts, both liberal and conservative, called it a rare, unscripted window into the humanity often lost in political theater. More surprisingly, it sparked a shift in tone across multiple news platforms. Viewers were no longer impressed by arguments that felt like shouting matches or smug one-liners. They wanted more of what they saw in that exchange. Moments that felt real, unscripted, raw. And the anchor? Her inbox, once filled mostly with political outrage and partisan bickering, was suddenly overflowing with something different: reflection. A former factory worker wrote, "I've never agreed with Trump, but when he said that about mothers and families, I remembered when I lost my job. No one cared. I just wanted someone who'd listen. Thanks for airing that moment." A single mother said, "I've never written a journalist before, but I felt like you saw something real that night. Maybe we all did." Even a retired veteran shared, "I used to laugh at politics. Now I'm wondering if maybe I stopped listening too soon." The anchor began to understand what that moment had actually exposed, a fatigue that had quietly grown in the American audience. People were exhausted, not just by politics, but by the constant pressure to pick a side, stay angry, mock the other. That interview gave them permission to pause, to reconsider, to listen, even to someone they didn't agree with. She later did a segment on political humility, not to praise Trump, but to explore a bigger question. What happens when we stop assuming the worst in each other? That episode became one of the highest rated in her show's history. And behind the scenes, something else happened. Producers from other networks reached out, not with criticism, but with curiosity. What made that moment work? How did you keep it real? How do we bring that kind of conversation into our shows? Even rival anchors, ones who had openly mocked both her and Trump in the past, admitted privately that it had made them think. In a quiet way, that one moment did something no campaign ad, no fiery speech, and no viral tweet could ever do. It humanized the conversation. It reminded people that beyond party lines, beyond outrage, beyond all the noise, there are stories. There is pain. There is hope. And above all, there is a need to be heard. Trump, for his part, didn't need to say more. That one appearance, the calm tone, the honest reflection, the absence of showmanship, did more to shift perception than months of rallies. And the anchor. She began to change too. Not in her beliefs, not in her values, but in her approach. She asked deeper questions. She listened longer. She didn't laugh so quickly. She learned that sometimes a smirk can silence a truth that's waiting to be told. And sometimes the person you expect to argue with ends up teaching you something instead. In the end, it wasn't about who won the interview. It wasn't about politics. It was about a rare moment where two people from completely different worlds stopped performing and started being real. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of conversation we need more of. Thanks for watching. If this video moved you, challenged you, or made you pause even for a second, do one thing: listen better. And if you're ready for more honest stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the moments that matter.